I think we can all agree this has been an incredibly frustrating season for the Chicago Bulls. Maybe even more frustrating than last season, and that's because there were a lot of hopes and expectations that this year the Bulls would be considerably a better team than they were the last couple of seasons. Not a contending team, but a better team, a team that could at least make the playoffs. But instead, we've seen nothing but an up and down season with a team that is so wildly inconsistent on a night-to-night basis that we really never quite know what to expect. So why is this happening? What is the problem with this Bulls team, especially after the trade deadline that has caused them to play so poorly despite the roster being upgraded? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Guys, before I get into the video, I am bringing back the score predictions giveaway. So if you're new to the channel, we've had a lot of new subscribers since the last time I did one of these, but the way that we do this is you predict the score of tonight's game for the Bulls versus Hornets in the format that you see here. That way it is very clear and not left up to interpretation, and you cannot edit your prediction anytime after the tip-off, and I will be checking timestamps on it. If you end up guessing the score of the game correctly, I'll be sending you a $100 gift card to the NBAstore.com. All I would need is your email address to send you the gift card electronically. So best of luck to you guys. As if there was anyone that potentially could know what the score would be of the Bulls game, your guess is as good as mine. So feel free to leave your prediction in the comments. But anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand. So this season has been strange to say the least, with everything going on with the global pandemic, with the season starting in December, having a shorter consolidated season, no fans or limited fans in the stadiums, a shorter training camp, no summer league for the rookies. We can all agree that this has been an unprecedented season in NBA history, and going into this season for the Bulls, despite having higher expectations than years prior, we knew they were not going to be competing for a championship, not with the way the roster was currently constructed, at least at the start of the year. We knew based on the comments from the new front office that this was going to be an evaluation season to see how the guys fit on the roster and make any necessary changes and adjustments to the roster going forward would be done at a later time, and I'll get back to that more in a minute. But after finally getting rid of Garpax after so many poor decisions and gross incompetence, and with the new front office firing one of the worst coaches the Bulls have seen in Jim Boylan, the already new direction for the Bulls franchise was looking positive, despite the fact that there was still a lot of work to be done in improving the roster itself. So the front office used their number 4 pick to select Patrick Williams. They signed Garrett Temple in free agency, both moves that were initially a bit of head scratchers, but then they actually proved to be pretty solid acquisitions. The Bulls started off the season a little rocky, getting blown out in their first 2 games, but then things started to come together a bit, and despite losing more games than winning, the team was playing with a different sense of energy and competitiveness that we had not seen in the prior season. They were competing well against some of the best teams in the league, narrowly losing to teams like the Lakers and the Clippers, and actually competing throughout the whole game. Still inconsistent, they had some bad losses during that time period as well, but for the most part this team was playing better than they did previously. Then leading up to the All-Star break and shortly after the All-Star break, the Bulls started playing poorly again, and it was clear this roster was in desperate need of some changes. As good and talented as some of the players were, there were a lot of holes and gaps in their game that still needed to be addressed. You had guys like Wendell Carter Jr. and Lauri Markkanen who were out for some time due to injury. There are defensive issues, obviously that's still the case to this day. Wendell Carter Jr. and Coby White lost their starting spots to Thaddeus Young and Tomas Satoransky, and it was becoming more and more clear as we got closer to the trade deadline, this team desperately needed a big man and a point guard to help run the floor. This became even more evident the days leading up to the trade deadline when you had the Bulls blow a 22-point lead to the San Antonio Spurs, in which they allowed the Spurs to go on a 17-0 run in the 4th quarter, and then to follow it up with a really bad loss to the Cavs. This was the night before the trade deadline, in which they got blown out by a Cavs team that didn't even have Colin Sexton or Kevin Love. And most of us here on the channel and across Bulls Twitter expressed that some sort of moves had to be made at the trade deadline. And I'll admit, I actually didn't think the Bulls were going to make any moves at the deadline. I figured given this being an assessment year that they were likely going to stay put and make the majority of their bigger moves in the offseason. But no, the front office shocked most of the NBA by making an aggressive move in trading for Nikola Vucevic in exchange for 2 first-round picks, Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter. And an all-star big man that's an elite rebounder and can stretch the floor with his shooting ability from three, it was pretty much exactly what the Bulls needed, given they had struggled so much against teams with dominant big men, and they really struggled to develop any kind of consistency when it came to rebounding. Now, defense obviously still was an issue, because as great as Vucevic is, he's not really known for his defense, and you just traded away arguably your best defender, although very inconsistent all season, in Wendell Carter Jr. So the Bulls decided to flip Chandler Hutchinson, Daniel Gafford, Luke Cornett to try to bring in Troy Brown Jr. and Daniel Tice, two solid defenders, one great perimeter defender and another great rim protector. So on paper, these were all great moves. Most people were praising these trades at the deadline, and I think most Bulls fans were, just simply not used to these kind of aggressive transactions being made by the front office, because the previous regime had historically been so cheap and very conservative in their trade moves at the deadline. Now, after the deadline, the Bulls struggled as they quickly began going down their toughest stretch of the season, playing against some of the best teams in the league on a very long road trip with limited practice and time for the new roster to build any type of chemistry. And what was initially thought, well, this is just going to take a little bit of time getting used to, and it's a hard schedule right now, slowly turned into weeks later playing much easier teams, and clearly not a lot has changed. In fact, you could even argue the Bulls have been worse since the trade deadline. The Bulls are now 5-10 since the deadline, and really the only impressive win in those 5 games was against the Celtics. The other wins the Bulls played against either bad teams or very short-handed teams. So it begs the question, what is the problem here? What is the problem with the Bulls that has caused them to perform so poorly since the trade deadline, despite, in theory, the roster being upgraded? Not saying that the moves at the deadline made them instant contenders, but you would expect a trade like that they had made for another all-star would actually allow them to be a bit more competitive and likely to be a playoff-bound team. Well, I have a theory for why the Bulls have been struggling, and it's probably not what you're thinking. And to be clear, it is a number of factors for why the Bulls have been struggling since the trade deadline. One is defense. The Bulls clearly still lack defensive intensity even after bringing in guys like Tyson Brown Jr. Another is obviously that most recently Zach Lavine has been out, and he was even injured for a period of time shortly after the trades. And then yes, part of it was, hard schedule post trades, particularly as it related to all the traveling, which gave the Bulls little rest and little time to practice with the new roster. And of course, the Bulls didn't get the playmaking point guard they were potentially hoping to get at the deadline and had to settle with what they had. Granted, Coby White has been playing a lot better recently, but I still maintain he is a better off the ball guard as he still develops and grows into the NBA in wanting to be a point guard, given this is only his second season. But above all of those factors, I think what has caused this team to play so poorly since the trade deadline is the fact that none of these guys really know where they stand in the eyes of the front office, at least most of them anyway. If there was anything this trade deadline showed to us, it was that this new front office is fairly cutthroat in their approach and not afraid to make big moves, even if that means moving guys that were once thought to be safe. And I think that has impacted the confidence and the way in which these guys play on the court. It's almost like most nights it's an every man for himself type approach to prove their worth and value to the team, when really all that does is just backfire. Before Coby White was reinserted into the starting lineup, he was making very poor decisions on the court that only benefited himself, taking bad shots, creating isolation plays on offense, trying to be a bit too hard with his ball handling skills that would lead to turnovers. And that doesn't just go for Coby White. The same for Lauri Markkanen. I mean, this guy and his confidence has been completely shot since the deadline, and really probably before that as well. He's not being aggressive in getting to the basket. He's often tentative in his jump shots because he hasn't been consistent with his shooting, and he's a liability on the defensive end. And you could even say the same could be said about Zach Lavine, although I think he knows where he stands and he's likely not going anywhere, but he tries to do too much sometimes to prove that he is the #1 option on this team. He's the guy that you build around. He's the franchise player. And when all of these guys are playing like that, playing for themselves and showing their role and their fit in the roster for this new front office in this evaluation year, quote unquote, when you do all of that, you're not going to play well. You're going to be inconsistent, you're going to get frustrated, you're not going to play team basketball, and you're going to lose a lot of games as a result. I mean, think about it. If you're at work and you know that your boss and your boss's boss is using a period of time as an evaluation of you to see how you fit long-term with the organization, you're going to be on high alert in terms of ensuring you're standing out and likely not going to consider the rest of your team and coworkers. No, because at the end of the day, you want to ensure that your job is secure. So in a way, I kind of wish Arturas didn't label this season as an evaluation year or an assessment year, even though I think we all know that that was likely going to be the case. I kind of wish he didn't say, we're not done and we're far from done after the trade deadline, meaning they're going to continue to make more moves this offseason to enhance the roster even further. I get that he has to say that, and obviously as a fan, you want to hear that from your executives, that they're going to continue to be aggressive in their approach. But when you have guys on the roster, and I hate to say it this way, but when you have guys on the roster who are a little soft and probably realizing they're on the chopping block, that kind of messaging isn't going to sit well with them. They're going to do whatever they can to show their value and their value only, and more often than not, that kind of play backfires, and the team as a whole suffers as a result. I know this is a lot of speculation, I could be completely off on this, and you're probably thinking, well, even if this was the case, they shouldn't be so weak mentally, and we don't want them on this team. And yeah, that might be true to an extent, but some of these guys are really young and still learning how to adapt to the business side that is the NBA, and they might take these things a little harder than others. I want to know what you guys think though. What do you think is the real problem here for why the Bulls have been struggling so much since the trade deadline? I know it's a number of things, but if you had to choose it being one main problem, what would it be? Let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to leave your score predictions for tonight's game as well for a chance to win a $100 gift card to the NBAstore.com. I'll have a live group chat for the game as always, so we can all follow along. Be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, as always, and I will catch you in the next one.